welcome to Consciously Healthy. I'm Claire.
I'm Laura, and today we are talking about female hormones, which is one of our passion areas. And how are your hormones?
My hormones suck.
Oh, have they always sucked?
No, my hormones have not always sucked. I used to have really regular periods, like really brilliant. And had my daughter, actually things were kind of fine, apart from the trauma, which I talk about on a regular basis. Actually, I just want to clarify, it's not because I want to roll around in my self-pity with that, but actually because I really don't believe that that there's enough out there, enough support out there for women where the truth happens, where people say, actually I had a horrific birth trauma and postnatal depression. So I kind of do it to break through the stigma. And my hormones, again, my periods were fine after I had my daughter. And then what happened was 2 years ago, my period suddenly went crazy, like 40 days, from 26, 27 days to suddenly 40 days, and then a 17-day cycle. And this kind of continued. And actually the last couple of years I've been doing so much work on it, and, acupuncture, homeopathy, kinesiology, working with a dietitian, literally you name it, liver detoxing, parasite cleansing. I've just done everything in the last 2 years. And I also put on quite a bit of weight with it. And it just absolutely got to misery point because my chronic fatigue came back to, February I was kind of dragging myself around, wasn't it? So kind of, a good few months ago now. And I was going to the doctors, having blood tests, nothing was showing. And I finally took myself to someone who did some functional testing, which was so brilliant, we now offer it, and discovered that I have extremely low cortisol levels. And this particular ex-doctor that I saw has given me what do we call it? It's not an actual diagnosis, it's a sort of a potential diagnosis. I'm not going through the test for the proper diagnosis, horrible. Something called Sheehan's syndrome, which is actually where the pituitary gland, which is one of the regulatory glands for our periods, got damaged during childbirth. So it's kind of explained everything, but now I'm doing the work to get them back on track. So that in a nutshell is why my hormones are awful. Now I tend to have kind of 5 good months and then 1 weird month. So it's getting better.
Yeah.
And my energy's back much more. How are you? How are your hormones?
I'm really blessed with my hormones. I've never had a problem with them. I think the only time I had a problem with my hormones is when I went on the pill. I tried 5 different types of pill. I was a raging monster on every single one of them.
With giant boobs.
Oh, and I was miserable with it. And so I just stay away from any kind of artificial hormones. And so, I love my cycle. I get quite due on. So I get quite swollen, a bit grumpy. But it's been quite a few years, so I've learned how to deal with it. And so have my family and friends. And actually, the more that I work with my cycle, the better my hormones are. And so we do a videocast around how to be with your cycle. So if that's interesting for you, then tune into that one, because that's a gorgeous one.
It is.
But I have lovely hormones. Thank you very much.
Actually, because we love our periods so much, because we've embraced them. It was quite funny because I saw a gynecologist as part of my exploration into what was going on, and he offered to give me an endometrial ablation, which is they do something with the endometrial lining in the womb. And he said, you won't have any periods. And I went, but I really like my periods. Please don't do that to me. And he was like, well, I really think it could be good for you. And I'm like, no, my problem is that I'm not having periods regularly enough. I don't want them.
Oh, don't take them away.
Just to say that I understand that some women, it's a very, very valid route for, so, I'm not particularly opposed to it. Just not for me.
Choice.
It's a personal choice.
Yeah. So, estrogen.
Oh, estrogen. Lovely estrogen. Or as my daughter used to start calling it, estrogen.
Estrogen. Oh
yeah. So there are 3 types of estrogen. Actually, not a lot of people know that, do they? We have 3 types of estrogen. Actually, technically there's 4, but I'm going to come on to that. We have different times we always have the 3 estrogens present in our body. They just become more dominant at different times in our life or different phases in our cycle. So we have estradiol or estradiol. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it. Estradiol. That's when we are not pregnant and just in our fertile phases. It's the estrogen that is the most sort of, when we talk about estrogen to do with our periods, that tends to be the one we're talking about. Then we have estriol, which is the form of estrogen that becomes most dominant when we are pregnant. And the last one is estrone, which comes into play once we've hit menopause. The fourth one that I alluded to earlier are also xenoestrogens, and that's with an X, X-E-N-O, xenoestrogens. And these are hormones that are mimicking estrogen and are actually coming, they're pollutants, they are actually coming from lifestyle choices, toxicity, pollution, use of plastics, and they cause estrogenic imbalances in the body, but they're not actually our estrogen, they're mimicking our estrogen.
So how our cycle works, how a traditional cycle will work, is after we bleed, estrogen's at its lowest and it starts to pick up, and it picks up to the middle of the month, which is when we are ovulating, and then progesterone comes into play at the middle of the month, and then the two go up and the hormones peak just before we bleed, and then we go back down again. And what's really interesting about estrogen is that it does have this relationship with progesterone, and if our progesterone is low, and this can be very common for women who are experiencing stress, because the body uses progesterone to produce the stress hormone cortisol. And so if you're very stressed, you're not going to be having very much progesterone. And this can really throw estrogen out. So either estrogen becomes deficient, and we'll go into that in more detail in a moment, or it becomes dominant because it's trying to do the job of both. So one of the big things that I work a lot with my clients is dealing with stress, and I know that you have a magic triangle of health that includes stress.
Yes. Oh, and a lot of, just before finishing off that one, a lot of the issue within health, I'm not talking necessarily medically, they work with hormones very differently to us alternative health practitioners. And I don't really know that. I know what they do, but I'm not going to comment on it. But a lot of practitioners in alternative health mostly work on estrogen, whereas often the issue is that people don't have enough progesterone. So, and this is the cortisol issue. So this leads me into my magic triangle.
And also, I think that's what's happened with your body as well, isn't it? Because the cortisol is very low in your body, which indicates that possibly the progesterone is also low. So the estrogen imbalance may be coming from more of a progesterone.
Exactly, which is very interesting and not really talked about. And something else that's not talked about is my magic triangle. And so if I have a triangle, on one corner we have estrogen, and on another corner we have insulin, and on the other corner we have adrenaline/cortisol, so the stress hormones. And there is a massive interplay between estrogen, our blood sugars, and our stress hormones. So this is also where we start to see estrogen imbalances coming in when people are stressed or when people's diet isn't great. Because if we have, for example, too much sugar in our diet, what happens is we start to get a spike in adrenaline, and then if it happens over a long period of time, cortisol. And if all of those things are kind of spiking, it has a knock-on effect to our estrogen levels. And, you know, equally, if our estrogen is out, it can cause sugar cravings, which can then put our adrenaline issues, can cause adrenaline issues. And, you know, the triangle can work any of those three ways. So part of the problem with only dealing with estrogen is that we're not addressing the underlying issues of the blood sugar involvement and also the adrenaline involvement. And so this is often why we don't get to the root cause of the problem. So we often have to take all three of those things into consideration at the same time. And what's so interesting is a lot of the clients that I see, clearly I'm walking the pathway of female hormones. And so I actually get, my absolute deep passion is working with female hormones, and I get a lot of clients with really in-depth female hormone issues. And a lot of the conditions, like the really horrific form of premenopause PMS, PMT, which I think is called PNDD. It's like premenstrual syndrome times a million. actually when you start looking at blood sugar involvement and adrenaline involvement, that's where we start to get the really big work coming, not just by working on the estrogen. So very important, if you have got hormone issues, to make sure that your blood sugars are stable. So making sure, and we talk about diets in different episodes, so check them out, that you're having a protein, a fat, and a non-starchy carbohydrate with every single meal. So lots of fruit and lots of vegetables, not too much in the way of fruit, sorry. Took that one, gave it, took it away again. But good fats and proteins, every meal, every snack, to keep your blood sugar stable.
And when we say good fats, we're looking at omegas, so freshwater fish, avocados, nuts, that kind of thing.
Yeah, flaxseed oil, a
Omega
lovely
3,
olive
6, and
oil,
9.
coconut oil, lovely, really great.
Yeah.
So it's really important. And then to try and remove the xenoestrogens, that's also important. And so not drinking out of plastic bottles, or eating out of things like out of Tupperwares or plastic too often, because that's a real cause of xenoestrogens. Not using, a big soapbox area of mine is chemical toxicity. And in fact, if you're interested in that, check out YouTube on Balance Wellness TV. There is a 2-part video on chemical toxicity, because some of them actually affect our hormones in such a deep way. So going clean with our skincare, and with also cleaning products around the house. And eating clean and balanced, just making sure that our food isn't full of processed, stuff. If food shouldn't really come out of the box or even really a tin, it's like it needs to come out of the ground or an animal.
Yeah, great. I think this is a subject that we're going to cover again, because there's so many layers to it, but that's a really good start for 10.
It really is. And just my final thing on that is, it's also very common that as soon as we have estrogen imbalances, it actually, and blood sugar issues and adrenaline issues, it causes digestion. So this is why so many women experience hormone issues, stress, and IBS. And so now you can start to see that the bigger picture, and that this is how, getting them balanced is really important.
And of course, it's the liver's job to be able to clean out the hormones such as estrogen out of the body. So if there is too much estrogen or an imbalance in estrogen in the body, then the liver's going to struggle. And the liver is also part of, it does incredible jobs in the body, but it's part of digestion, it's part of detoxifying. And women who are experiencing estrogen build-up or estrogen symptoms, there's the common period symptoms, but there's also things like fatigue. And if you check out the work of Charles Poliquin, he says that estrogen stores in the fat cells around the hips and the waist. So if you're suffering with any of those, it's really worth getting your estrogen levels and your progesterone levels checked out.
Yeah, absolutely. Although not just with a blood test, because the blood tests show us that the hormones are present in the body. We actually work with functional diagnostic testing we use I can't say that word, laboratories testing, and those kind of tests actually show what your body is doing with the hormones, and it's absolutely illuminating. So if you have got problems, there is a lot of help out there.
Yeah. Lovely. That's the beginning of estrogen and female hormones.
Couldn't we? So
yes, or subscribe here so that you can catch up on regular shows, and we really look forward to seeing you again next time.
Bye-bye.